All right, everybody. Good evening. It is Sunday night. It is a special time for us to do another weekly episode of Conversations with Commodores. And what we do each week, and we have for almost 5 years now, is we're telling the oral history of the Vanderbilt football program, whether it's ball players on the field or coaches, administrators, trainers, whoever it may be. But before I introduce tonight's guest, let me tell you a few things about her. She comes out of New Orleans, where she calls the Mannings as part of her friends. She can tell you where the baseball glove chair is at Surratt Student Center. She's also a national champion in baseball with Vanderbilt's baseball program in 2019. That's not enough. Let's keep going. She can tell you about the rule against perpetuities. Think about that for just a minute. Currently, she probably has her eyes on what the Ravens' tendencies on defense is going to be the third week this season against the Cowboys. I'm going to keep going. She is the three-time defending dominoes champ on the Greek Isle of Mykonos. There's more to it, but we're going to get to the rest of it, guys. Please, I am so pleased to have tonight's guest, Marianna Salas. Good evening, Marianna. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited.
Well, as you and I have been talking over the last several weeks, I think you have a very important place in the Vanderbilt football program history. And what we do each week, we're telling the oral history of the program. Again, whether it's players, trainers, whatever your connection is with the program, that's why we tell these stories. And you have, in what you were involved with during Coach Mason's era, is a unique place in that story. So that's why we're here tonight. I'm glad you've got a few minutes to share with us this evening. Before we get to what you're currently doing and before we get to Vanderbilt, let's talk about growing up in New Orleans. Were you always a sports fan? Were you an athlete growing up? What were your connections with athletics as a kid?
Well, it's actually pretty wild, but I grew up in a family that really did not prioritize sports much at all. My dad immigrated to New Orleans from Ecuador when he was 16, so football to him until I started working for Vanderbilt football meant soccer pretty much. Obviously we were always Saints fans, like as a matter of just being in New Orleans, and New Orleans is a city that really cares about the Saints. And then that really was my only kind of connection to sports aside from being a extremely serious equestrian for my entire life. My father rode horses before I was born and would wake up every morning, drive to our family farm in Mississippi, ride his two horses, shower, and go to work at his law firm. So for a very long time, he was an avid equestrian. And when I was about 3, I started riding his very horses that he once rode. So he put me on one of those, and that might have been the worst decision of his life because that started close to 20 years of extremely serious show jumping career for me, which I'm so blessed to have been able to do. It's like the best experience I've ever had. I still ride here in Baltimore, and I hope to continue doing that for the rest of my life. But it doesn't really have anything to do with football or baseball or literally any conventional sport at all. My brother grew up playing soccer, but like I was always at a horse show. I had no interest in any other sport at all. So then the Saints went to the Super Bowl when I was in, I think, 6th grade, maybe fifth. But that was the start of some of where my interest in football or really any other sport besides show jumping really started because for some reason we started kind of going to Saints games either right before or soon after the Saints won the Super Bowl. I remember watching the Saints Super Bowl with my family, and we were downtown in New Orleans. So as soon as they won, like it was complete pandemonium. I remember it being just so cool seeing the entire city unite around something that happened on a football field. I just thought that was like really, really cool. I was
Well, considering the timing of when that occurred in relation to Katrina, I'm
It was
sure,
massive. It was a massive moment for the city. It was,
and you were 10, maybe 11, I think, at the time, something like
yeah.
that.
When Katrina hit, I was about to turn 8. It was like the first weekend of after school started, so right before Labor Day weekend, and I was like 7 going on 8. Um, I didn't really I didn't really realize like the magnitude of what was really going on during Katrina. But by the time I was in 5th or 6th grade, whenever the Saints won the Super Bowl, I was old enough to realize how special of a moment that was for the city. And everybody I knew was just so electrified by the momentum of the team and how it mirrored so well the momentum of the city coming back from such a tragedy. So I thought that was really special. It kind of sparked something inside me. But then we sort of started going to games, and the team was good. And we were by no means season ticket holders. We were by no means, blocking off time to watch the games at home. But I remember so vividly how loud the Superdome would get, and you walk in through these kind of tunnels to get to your seats, and the vision that I was repeatedly encountered with was walking through this dark little tunnel, and then suddenly the Superdome explodes in front of you, and it is louder than you've ever heard in your life, and everyone in that Superdome cares about one thing and one thing only, and that is the football on the field. And that was the coolest thing to me because I just had never seen something that was so just unifying like that. And that was something that show jumping didn't really have. It's an individual sport. And then that kind of segued into being in high school when I started working for the football team to get a PE credit because I was missing school to ride horses. And then I was again exposed to how unifying a team can be. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. But no, I had no plan ever even close to working in athletics at all. Nothing of the sort. I just thought it was cool that the Saints won the Super Bowl.
Well, everybody has their origin story about how they get their interest. Just as a side note, have you seen Martha and Snoop at dealing with
Oh my
the
gosh, I have. I love it. I love it so much. It's fantastic.
well, that I guess that leads to your off season. Is that going to spark you back to go into to riding and competitions?
Absolutely. So I am so fortunate to be able to ride here in Baltimore through a connection that I made through the guy who hired me here. But I
Mhm.
actually was at the barn yesterday, and after my summer vacation, I came back and I was like, "Hello, I'm back. I'm ready to get back on a horse." And
So good.
thankfully, they are really flexible and they work around my schedule brilliantly. So I'm so glad to be able to do that. But I do still have as I'm sitting, in my house watching the replays of the equestrian competitions, I still do have the extreme desire to go to the Olympics for show jumping.
Mhm.
So maybe that'll
Maybe
happen.
one day.
Maybe that'll happen at some point too.
Maybe one day. All right, you go to Isidore, is it Isidore Newman High School in
Isidore Newman School, yeah.
the for those who follow football, particularly New Orleans football, and you know the Mannings, it's the same high school, but you would have come through, I guess, were there any of the Mannings there at the time you came through? Clearly you're older than Arch, but are there other older siblings?
No, so actually when I was there, um, Arch was in either lower or middle school when I was in high school. I don't exactly know how old he was at the time when I remember him playing on like the middle school team,
Mhm.
but that's at least like 7 or 8 years of separation if I'm
Yeah.
roughly doing the math
Oh yeah,
right.
you're the ripe old age of what, 26, maybe 27 soon?
It's terrible. -2 for
Yeah.
COVID, but
Ooh, you're getting so old.
but no, so the Manning brothers were obviously well ahead of me, but I did start at Newman the year after Odell Beckham left,
Mhm.
which is funny because he was on my team last year, and funny enough, I was wearing a Newman sweatshirt and he stops me in the hallway and is like, "Wait a minute, what?" And so
Mhm.
we found out that, you know, we were both from New Orleans, which like obviously I knew who he was, so it wasn't news to
Right,
me.
right.
But I was like, "Oh yeah, I was just talking to Coach Nelson Stewart, who's still the head coach there and was his coach, was the coach first coach I ever worked for." And he was like, "Oh my gosh, Coach Stu was the best coach I've ever had." So fun bonding moment, but I will never get rid of my Newman sweatshirts because
That's right.
it's
That's
just a
right.
foundational part of where I come from.
And you know, the football world is not as large as the outside world thinks that it is.
It's
There's so
very small.
there's so many connections, and we're going to weave through that as we continue going forward. So you get exposed much more in high school to football, and then how did you end up in Nashville? What brought you to Nashville as opposed to other schools you could have gone to?
So I was almost militant about my college applications process. I still have the Excel spreadsheet of all the schools I was applying to, all the essays I needed to write, what the status of each one of those essays was, what the deadlines were. Like it's completely insane. I still have it. I think it's hilarious. But I didn't ever actually like think I was going to Vanderbilt. I actually applied to Rice in Houston, early decision, and got denied, which was very confusing to me. But then I kind of had to make a second run at things because I had put all my eggs in that basket and it didn't work out. So my college counselors helped me out a lot. And then I applied regular decision, which was like significantly later, and ended up getting into Vanderbilt. And so at the time, it was definitely the best school I got into. And having worked really hard in high school to get into a really like academically strong college, we went and visited. But the key was that I hadn't visited Vanderbilt before because it really wasn't on my radar, even though it definitely should have been.
Mhm.
But I visited colleges on pretty much every school break from the time I was a freshman in high school all the way to being a
Wow.
senior. So I visited many, 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 many schools, but for some reason, we just didn't go to Vanderbilt.
Mhm.
So after I got in, my parents were like, "Oh, okay, we have to go see it."
Mhm.
So I woke up one morning and was in that hotel room right there by the stadium.
Mhm.
And my
Marriott.
mom, this is where my mom really messed up. She booked a room knowing at the time then that I really enjoyed football. She didn't have any idea where this was going at this point, but
Oh.
she knew that I really wanted to go to a school with a
Mhm.
football team because I just thought that would be entertaining. She booked a room in that hotel right there,
Mhm.
and it was the room that was facing the stadium, which
Mhm.
was like a nice little touch. Okay, mom, great. So I woke up and I looked out and I saw the stadium. I was like, this will work just fine. We go on our tour a couple hours later, and about 15 minutes in, I was like, okay, we're good. I'm sold.
Wow.
So I mean, what's not to love? The campus looks great.
Yeah.
Stadium looks cool. It's great. And it was in a great neighborhood. I really wanted to be in a city.
Mhm.
So 10 out of 10. From there on, never looked back. But I had no idea that I was going to go to Vanderbilt until really like a few weeks before I just decided. It was not on my radar at all. I had no plan.
Well, either before you made that decision from that trip or before, or I guess I should ask it this way. At what point in your journey did you decide that you would continue in athletics in some capacity?
Very soon after I decided to go to Vanderbilt. Yeah, so this is where it gets kind of wild. I during high school, as I said, worked for the Newman football team, really just to get a PE credit. but I was on the sports medicine staff, which was essentially like just kind of helping with like the medical equipment, helping the certified athletic trainers with all the logistics of what needed to happen for a football game and football practices. And I liked that. And being a little bit medically inclined, I thought I might want to be an orthopedic surgeon. I was just interested in it. So I took it really seriously. And it was a great outlet for me to not only meet people, but also like have something to just try hard in. And then I found out, okay, I'm going to go to Vanderbilt. Great. They have a football team. And so I broached the subject of, well, what if I wanted to work for the football team at Vanderbilt with my parents? And they quickly shut that down. They quickly said, absolutely not. You're going to school. You're going to study either like economics or medicine. Like you're going to school. You're not going to football school. And I was like, okay. And I very expediently decided that that was not going to be the case. And in fact, I was going to work for the team. So I got to work on my computer the summer before I started there. So I think about May, if I looked back in my emails, because I don't delete my emails, I am certain that I'd be able to find these emails. But I started emailing people in the athletic department, specifically with the sports medicine staff, saying, hello, I'll be starting as a freshman. Do you guys have any like open intern positions? Whatever. And lo and behold, they said, oh, of course. Like, when can you start? Can you come for fall camp? Can you start like in July, like a month before school starts? And I was like, not going to work because obviously my parents weren't going to know.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, sorry, won't be able to come in early, but as soon as I get to campus, I'm all yours. So they said, okay, great. Like first day on campus, come to McGugin at 7 a.m. I was like, wow, that's kind of early. I had no idea what I was getting into. I
Yeah,
had
I was
absolutely
going
no
to
idea.
say, and so this would have been in August of 16.
August of 16, yes.
Okay.
Like my parents left like the night before and I was walking over to McGugin. I had no idea where it was. It was a really long walk from the Commons. Yeah, it was I had no idea what I was getting into.
Mm-hmm.
But I show up and they're like, okay, yeah, we'd love to have you. Can you like start officially tomorrow? And I said, yeah. And they were like, okay, well, be here at like 5:15. And I was like, oh my gosh, which seems comical to me now because my alarm goes off at like 4:30 in the morning every single day now.
Right.
So that was my first day at Vanderbilt. But the issue was that I still had Find My iPhone on, like from when your parents track you.
Oh, oh, of
Um, that I mean that was just like a safety measure in high school really, but
course.
then my mom, I knew that she could see this, so I was like, well, I have to turn this off. I have to like I can't have her see where I am at 5 in the morning at the football facility. Like she's gonna
But
know.
before you continue with that thought, you do realize who's going to be able to watch this later.
Oh yeah, no, they know now.
Okay.
Everything's
Oh,
good.
look, we got to
I'm
establish
not
ground rules. I just want to make sure.
no,
Okay.
everyone knows now, but for a while this was the best kept secret on the planet. Um, yeah, no, this is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Parents, I'm sorry. Anyone thinking of having kids, I hope this doesn't happen to you. But if it does, it all turns
We
out well.
do. We'll have a disclaimer at the end of the video, so keep going.
It's hilarious. But yeah, so I just decided that I was going to do this, right? And I was determined if nothing else. And so I turned off Find My iPhone and was like, well, I'm going to live basically a double life. No one's going to know about this except for me, and I'm going to see how it goes. If it goes badly, then I'll stop and then no one will know about it and it'll be fine. And if it goes well, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But that I made that decision almost immediately after I decided to go to Vanderbilt that I was going to work for the team. And it worked.
And how many days, weeks, months into the turning on the phone until you got busted?
Oh, I never got busted. That's the thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
again, parents, I'm really sorry.
Well, so you don't get in further trouble. Let's kind of What was your first responsibility with the team? Had you studied about the coaches or the program? Did you know anything going in?
So my first responsibility with the team was an athletic training intern. I worked for the football athletic training specifically, not any other sport, really, because that's where they needed the most help.
And
Obviously,
who was the head trainer at that time?
the head trainer was Tom Bozung, or for most people who know him, Boz. Amazing person. I was
Mhm.
terrified of him for like months when I first started. He, yeah, he likes things done at a very high level all the time, and there is no room for error, which now looking back on it, I absolutely loved everything about like the way that he taught me to do things
Mhm.
because it had a net positive effect for sure. And I'm so grateful that I got to work for him, and the rest of his staff too was just amazing. Like we had there were, I think, in total 6 or 7 certified
Mhm.
athletic trainers that we all worked together and we became very close. I still talk to
And,
them all to this
and that
day.
and they're across all sports, not just football.
No, they worked, so the majority of them worked with football, and then some of them had additional sports that they would work with in the spring.
Mhm.
So, for instance, uh, Maya Sullivan, she worked with football during the fall, and then she worked with swimming during their season. So some of them did double duty, um,
Sure.
but they were primarily focused on football. So it
And
was Adam Clemens, who was he kind of like managed the interns. He was kind of like our dad in the sense. He was always looking out for us, always kind of like our first point of contact. Awesome guy, learned so much from him, have so much respect for him. Justin Wenzel was also there. Everyone that everyone that knows Justin knows that he is like a singular person. He lives off of just straight Mountain Dew and Krispy Kreme donuts.
oh God.
Amazing person, is so good at his job, is so good at his job. And then Carrie Wilbar, a guy named Joe Wisniewski, who actually ended up going to Minnesota, I think. And then, like I said, Maya Sullivan. And then it was a team of interns that were students,
Mhm.
regular like civilian students. And then every year they also brought on a handful of students who were from other schools who were studying to become certified athletic trainers. But
Mhm.
because Vanderbilt doesn't have a program that does that, it was
Mhm.
kind of a new crop every year for their like practicum studies.
Sure,
So it
sure.
was that core group of staff members and then me and a handful of other kids.
When, how long before it was till you met Coach Mason?
Oh, not that long. I think probably within the first week.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was drinking from a fire hose in every sense because not only did you have to learn like everyone on the team's names and their jersey number so that you could find them on the field.
Yeah, and we're
Um,
talking 100 to 115 guys at any
Lots of people, lots of
given
people. I made
time.
flashcards.
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah.
But all right, then that leads me to, when did you become comfortable in the work and the job that you were being tasked to do?
Oh man. Um,
Was it that fall? Was it the next spring? Because, and
it
here's
was
why I ask that. When I have ball players on and they talk about very similar entry experiences that you just described, drinking from a fire hose, because the playbook is different, the personnel is different, it's a whole different environment, and very few guys, even the top athletes who contribute in the fall of their freshman year, still may not feel comfortable until that spring or even into the next season, next school term when they're sophomores. So, did you have some kind of a recognized moment for you that's like, yeah, this is where I need to be? Things are good.
I think my second season, I had a huge step from my first season. I remember being so much more comfortable, so much more familiar with how things ran that I was able to kind of help onboard the new crop of
Oh,
interns that we had. So
more responsibility. Yeah.
that was the moment where I realized, oh, I'm probably gonna have to tell my parents soon.
Wait,
Um,
wait, 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 wait. They didn't know the whole freshman year?
no, they didn't know until the end of my second season at all. They
You
had
weren't,
no idea.
no photos got put online, no social media. There was nothing.
No. So
Wow. No wonder you're the three-time defending Domino's champ out of Mykonos. I get it now.
there were no photos again because the iCloud, thank you, Steve Jobs. Every photo that is on my phone is also on the rest of my family's phones, which we probably need to maybe get away from that. But I mean, it's kind of like helpful now, but for a really long time, there was no way that I could undo that. So I was extraordinarily careful to not have any photos of anything football related, like anything at all, not just photos of me doing football things, but anything that even touched the sport of football was not on my phone.
So not even photos with your buddies who were on the team
No,
or the training
none.
staff or any of
Absolutely
it.
none. I have so few photos from my freshman year of college just because like I couldn't have them on my phone. So or else my parents would see them. And I whenever like it was so serious that I had all of my team issued gear, which was several duffel bags full. I left them at my friend's house, who my friend who lived in Nashville, who was like a Nashville native. I left them at her house over the summer. Like
It's
there
like
was
you're
no
living.
evidence of anything.
It's like you were living a double life for the
A
first
full
freshman
on double
year.
life. Full on double life. I
How
my
did you
parents all
explain? Well, how did you explain all of your free time that was actually time with the football program? Were you studying?
oh yeah, I was always studying. But also the thing that actually made it really doable was that the hours that I was doing football things were hours that I would either be sleeping or maybe working out in the morning or like just not really doing anything because it was from 5 a.m. to like 11 a.m. or
Right.
around 10:30. And so
Mhm.
during that time, I wasn't going to be doing anything anyway. My parents weren't awake at 5:30. So it's not like it was all afternoon and evening. Like some schools that practice in the afternoon might have forced me to be in that situation, but thankfully we were a morning practice team and that worked out pretty well. But yeah, they had no idea for let's see, about 18 months. No idea. So I can't remember if I went early my second year for, oh, yeah, I think I did. I think
For
I
fall
did
camp?
go early for fall camp my second year, and I said that I had like sorority rush or something like that.
All
Thankfully,
right.
my mom was not in a sorority. She didn't know that that wasn't really happening.
I'm dying to hear the moment, the conversation when you shared with your folks.
Yeah. So, like I said, I decided that I might have to tell them, hey, like, I actually work for the football team. Sorry. When I started my second year and I was in a position where I was not only really comfortable with the program and I was really good at it, but
Mhm.
I was also progressing at a rate that was similar to the kids that were studying to actually be athletic trainers. Not that that was actually my goal at the time, but I took it seriously enough to where I was given lots of responsibility and I was helping to onboard the new interns that fall camp. So just because I was excited about it and I thought like, okay, this is something that probably I should share, I just almost selfishly, I just wanted like my parents to know about something cool I was doing. It wasn't like I was doing anything bad that I was keeping a secret. I had a job that was a secret. So then the season goes by and I decided, all right, I got to tell them somehow. But my dad's a lawyer, which you can relate to. It's best to have all the facts. And if there are any holes in your fact pattern, They're going to freak out. So, you know, it's just the way I knew I had to approach it was nothing else other than a 45 slide PowerPoint, which again, I think because I never delete anything, I probably have that PowerPoint somewhere.
Side
But
note, I need to see that when we're done.
I actually think I have it on this computer.
And
Um,
I'm going to assume that you've made your grades for the first year, so there's
oh
no
yeah,
issue there. No, I know that. I'm just saying
they
this for the
weren't great. I mean, it was
Kurlanders.
first semester, but they were
I'm
fun.
just saying this for the Brian Kurlanders of the world out there who may be watching tonight, that you were on solid grounds, or you made sure you had crossed all T's, dotted all I's before this amazing PowerPoint presentation was.
Oh yeah, I spent weeks on this PowerPoint. I don't think I've spent this long on a PowerPoint prior to that, and definitely not since then. But I mean, this PowerPoint I knew was going to have to explain absolutely every detail of everything I was doing and why and who was involved and what the timelines were and like what the locations were, what the security level was, because it's a
And
dad.
was there only an audience of two for this PowerPoint, or were there more
Oh
than
no.
that?
So I actually only ever gave this presentation to my dad, who then later told my mom. Um, yeah, I thank God I didn't have to do it twice. But the reason it was only one was because I sneak attacked and I printed out my slides on the piece of paper. I had my little notes. I had kind of a loose script. And I showed up with the PowerPoint on my iPad to my dad's office. I called his secretary, who's my aunt, and I said, "Hey, is he busy right now? Can I come by? I have like something I need to. I have a presentation for him." And she was like, "Yeah, no, he's not busy." So I showed up and I walked into his office and put the iPad down, and the first slide was a picture of the football stadium, I'm pretty sure. And the look on his face as soon as that opened was just pure horror. He was so mad. And so I said, "Hey, I got a presentation for you. If you'll just hold your questions till the end." And he tried to talk. And I was like, "Just hold your questions."
Mm.
Anyway, so I go through this extensive PowerPoint of everything from my typical schedule on a practice day, typical travel itinerary. Mind you, I've been flying around the country with people that my dad has never heard of. My parents have like literally no idea that I'm in another state for like a full 36 hours. They just have no
with
idea.
with
So,
with your location services off.
oh yeah, no, they had no idea. They thought I was in Nashville.
I've got a question from the crowd, and
Oh
this is
yes, please.
this is coming from a former ball player who played in the 70s. He's a lawyer in Huntsville, a good friend of mine. You're a double life, a 45-point hour presentation. How do we know that you're not in the Secret Service or the FBI right now?
You don't.
There you go,
You
Kenny.
live close to DC, so you might just never know. I drive past the NSA every time I go to DC.
We'll never know. Keep going. Keep going.
So, no, but actually it was like so extremely well orchestrated.
Mhm.
It would also almost everybody I knew besides my parents knew that I worked for the football team. Everybody in New Orleans knew. Everybody knew. I told everybody and I said, "Hey, look, one thing though, you cannot tell my parents because they don't know." And thankfully everyone had my back, which was great because everybody knew.
But the city of New Orleans is not known for that.
I know,
Word,
it's so
word gets
surprising.
around in New Orleans,
I
right?
know, but they just had my back. They had my back.
Hmm.
They knew. I think they just knew that my parents were just probably not ready for that. And they
So
knew that I had a plan.
what turned your dad?
Well, good question. I give this very extensive
Mhm.
presentation to him, and he was livid, as one would be. I mean, I'll give him credit. Like, I understand why he was mad. I was bold-faced lied to him and my mom for a very long time. Yeah, it was, I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't like I wasn't doing anything like illegal. I wasn't, going out partying. If anything,
You've already done it. You don't have to sell it again.
I was doing good things. And so I think he was mad that I was lying for a long time. And then a couple hours later, I think he kind of realized, okay, like she was lying because she had a job and she was excited about it and is still continuing to succeed at this. And I think he just kind of realized that a few hours later and texted me and said, everything's okay. Just don't lie to us again. And I was like, whew. Because at that point, I'm thinking I'm getting pulled out of school. I am never going to see campus again. Like, this is just not happening. No way. I'm grounded for life.
You're coming home to the University of New Orleans. You're living at home, and you're going to work in the
Absolutely.
law office.
Absolutely. And I'm probably going to have an ankle monitor on my ankle. Yeah. So, no,
Well,
but
well,
everything
you
ended
get.
up cool.
Hold on, I gotta ask you. You get that text. Had your dad spoken to your mom at that point?
I have no idea. I have no
Did,
idea.
did that text give you some sense of relief yet, or did it take until your mom was notified?
Oh no, that was really the only text that I needed. I mean, my mom is a lot more rational when it comes to like just me
Mhm,
doing things like this.
mhm,
I don't know, I don't really know why, but she was probably a lot less of an obstacle to me continuing in this than my dad was, because my dad was the one that was going to be super mad just because he's the one that wants everyone to be safe and wants to know everything that's going on all the time.
Sure,
My
sure.
mom to some extent too, but my mom was a lot more easily on board with that. And she really knew that I loved football by then, and she knew that it could be something really cool. My dad was like, "What are you doing? Like you're supposed to be studying economics."
Mhm.
Again, because he doesn't really like know a lot about football. My mom knows more about football and was just the writing was kind of more on the wall for her than it was for my dad.
Sure. Well, you get past this monumental hurdle. Does this now, I guess, pave the way for you to start? I'm not going to use the word enjoy, but now just kind of let your hair down a little bit amongst the family and get even more involved with the football program. I don't know if
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
possible, but
No, absolutely. Like from then on, I actually started to see athletics as a potential career for the first time. And that was really interesting because, again, like I had no plan of doing anything related to what I'm doing now. I had absolutely no idea. But when I started to think based on the experiences I had had at Vanderbilt and the people I'd been exposed to and the opportunities that I'd had put in front of me, okay, there's lots of potential jobs that would be really exciting and cool and would be very meaningful to me. That was sort of after my parents knew and I was able to like talk with them about it. That was when I started to fully invest in that. Now, there was a section of my PowerPoint that had a potential career paths section. So it was like, well, I could go on to do this, I could go on to do that with the experience I'm getting with the football team here. Now, those were all hypothetical at the time. I was trying to beef up the presentation, make it look really serious.
right. But hold on, spoiler alert, she went to law school, guys. Continue.
Yeah, so then I actually started to like fully invest in those potential career paths and take them really seriously. So then I started taking on other roles in the Vanderbilt athletics department, which I was only able to do after being there for a couple years and building relationships. And that really exposed me to a whole huge wide array of possibilities. And that was really kind of like the genesis of my official like career.
Let me pause you right there because that's a very important point that you don't have to be a member of the football squad and be on the team and play to have so many other um, avenues of potential professions that come about just being part of the program. And you just explained beautifully how yours, or you're in the middle of explaining how yours showed themselves. because I know you were with the football program for a period. You were also with the baseball program, and we're going to get to that part in just a second. But you never know who you're going to be introduced to. You never know who's going to walk through the doors at McGugan. They could be part of the Vanderbilt family in some connection or not, but just being there in that moment. This is my question for you. Just being there every day, you met people from everywhere, I suspect, who came through that building. And at some point or another, they either had a connection to sports, Vanderbilt, or the Nashville community.
Absolutely. I mean, I simply, like I said earlier, I had no idea what I was in store for. I thought I just was going to have a fun kind of side job, but the the people I was exposed to, one, were just such excellent people. Like, so fortunate to have encountered the people that were on staff at the time and the people that Vanderbilt has always employed in the athletics program. Like, from David Williams, who
Mhm.
sadly passed away while I was there, to now Candace Story, all the way down to everyone in the training room, the weight room, the nutritionists, equipment staff, everybody was so instrumental in exposing me to all the different avenues that I had in front of me. And I was really, really excited to explore all of those, mostly because all the people that I encountered were so friendly and so generous with their time and their expertise. And they really opened the doors for me. I didn't really have to open a whole lot of doors, aside from the fact that I just had to show up every morning at a few minutes before 5 in the morning and just work really hard and be there and meet people. So that was really important for me because I, without encountering all of those people and through those people, all those opportunities, I would have had no idea that my sort of college side job would turn into many different types of career paths for me. I really did not know at the time what jobs there even were in sports besides being an athlete. And not being an athlete, I mean, my parents thought this too. They were like, well, you don't play football. Like, why are you working for the football team? Like, this makes no sense. And to some degree, they kind of had a point, at least at the time, with the information I had. But I learned quickly that there's room for many more people than just the athletes on the field in the sports space. And Vanderbilt was such a fertile ground for me to explore all those opportunities, mostly because it was just a small program that needed help in a lot of different ways. And I was willing to help and I was interested and I wanted to explore all these different opportunities with communications and other sports and football operations and athletic training. I was just interested in everything. And I was so fortunate to have an opening for me in pretty much whatever I wanted to get involved in based just because of the people that were there.
Right place at the right time, because
Extremely.
you were part of one of the most special SEC baseball program seasons in
That's
not just the history of Vanderbilt, but the history of the sport for the SEC. You take us to 2019. It's still a season that's very dear to my heart, and you had a front row seat.
so that was a really cool experience for me because um I was working for Alan George, who is the director of sports
Mhm.
media and communications there. And the way I got involved in this was actually through the HOD major, human and
Mhm.
organizational development.
Mhm.
Obviously, all Vanderbilt people are familiar, but the HOD program has your senior capstone project, which is you go basically intern at whatever company you choose, ideally in an industry that you are interested in pursuing post grad, and you write papers and do case studies on um, the work dynamics and the small group behaviors, basically applying all this knowledge you've learned in the major. And I was thinking it would be really cool to do something in athletics of some sort. So I was getting coffee somewhere in McGugan, and who else besides Larry Leathers, who at this point I'd met countless times from 3 years of just being with the football program. We had become friends, and he was asking me about what major I was doing, and I mentioned to him that I was looking for my capstone internship because it was the fall of my junior year because I ended up doing this internship the spring of 2019. And he was like, "Oh, well, we're always looking for interns in the communications office." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Great." So I went over and I met with them, and Larry introduced me to Alan and their whole staff, and I interviewed, and that was how I got that job. And I got nothing except class credit, and that's just on paper. But out of that experience, I
Yeah,
got
I was gonna
one,
say,
fabulous connections. I love all the people I worked with so much, and the experiences that I was able to enjoy as a member of that communication staff were not only just baseball, but I worked at lacrosse games and basketball games and was just exposed to so much more outside of the Vanderbilt football world. Everything else related to athletics was suddenly in the palm of my hands, which was fantastic. I was exposed to things that I, again, had no intention of ever investing in, but it was just the right place, the right time. Literally in that coffee room when Larry was like, "Hey, we would like to, you know, we'd like to have interns." I said, "Great." So
Larry was on the show a while ago,
I
and
know I saw he's the
he has
best.
such a fabulous, fabulous story. Guys who are just tuning in, I've got Marianna Salas. She was at Vanderbilt 2016 to 20, and we're kind of going through a bit of that part of her story. But the 2019 baseball season, um, I don't know if any school will ever duplicate that, but what a special time that was. And probably several of the members of that team were some of your classmates.
Yeah, that was another really special part about my entire time at Vanderbilt was the teams that I got to contribute to, baseball, football, all of the above,
Mhm.
were not just like my work and what I was investing my time into, but it was also very much a group effort of like me and my friends. Some like all of these players were close friends of mine. So it was just double the amount of pride, double the amount of pressure. You feel everything with them because we're pouring so much of our lives and our time and our attention and effort into this every single day. And so when that baseball season started, I had, again, like, I knew the team was really good and we expected to do well, but I certainly did not expect to find myself in Omaha, Nebraska at like on the field of that stadium,
Yeah.
like touching dirt after having just won a national champ. I just had no earthly idea that that would be me ever in my life. Certainly not even at the beginning of that season because the the College World Series happens in the summer, and I go home for the summer. At the time, actually, so school ended, and you're nearing the end of the season or getting into the SEC tournament or right before then. So end of May, the
Mhm.
team's looking really, really, really good.
Mhm.
And I don't think that I was a part of many losses, and I was at almost every single game. That
There
was,
weren't many that year.
yeah, I honestly I can't remember one, but I was, I was sitting in the press box, editing tweets and photos and things like that, all of the streams of communication, and I don't really remember a single like negative graphic or like a loss graphic. I didn't make any loss graphics. So it was great. But then I go home and I actually had an internship that summer in Los Angeles with another Vanderbilt alum named Sean Kiernan, who is now a NFL agent at Athletes First, which is a really large agency in the business. But he took me on as a summer intern, and I was kind of following the team from LA as I was working for him and his staff. But then the um let's see, so the super regionals go by, absolutely smashed whoever it was. I think it was Duke. And
Don't
then
you remember that was
it was
Kumar's
it was a huge no hitter. I remember that.
that
I
was
have the
Kumar's
newspaper.
19 strikeout no hitter?
I have that newspaper. I actually was looking at that in my bedroom sometime
Yeah,
over the summer. That
because
was
if
crazy.
you may remember, we got smoked by them in one of those games, like a 10 or 12 or
Oh
15.
yeah, it was bad. And
Yeah,
then we roared back and
yeah.
it was like so momentous. Okay. So then we go into the College World Series
Mhm.
and just win after win after win. And so I'm watching the game against Louisville, which I'm pretty sure we lost the first game to Louisville and had
Yep.
to beat them
Mhm.
to make it into the championship. And I'm watching this game. And at the time, I'm also texting Alan George, and he said, if I mean, shortly before the final out, he said, if we win this game, will you come to Omaha and help us for the championship series? And I was like, hell yeah, like I'll figure it out. I don't care. Like I'll be there. I have no idea like what day that is. I'm like, I guess I gotta ask for time off for my internship. I don't know. Didn't matter because I'm standing in front of this TV screaming at it, hoping that we win. And obviously we won that game in smashing fashion. And about 45 minutes later, I had a flight out of Las Vegas to go to Omaha because it's the only flight I could get. And 2 days later, I woke up in Omaha and started like the best week of my life.
Mhm.
I mean, okay, there have been many really great weeks in my life, but that one will live forever in my memory so vividly. I had such a fabulous time, but not only was it just amazing that I went home for the summer. I went to my internship. I thought like, okay, this chapter is kind of done.
Mhm.
But then just so grateful that Alan thought highly enough of me and my work to invite me out for what would end up being such an immensely special experience, regardless of whether we won or lost that championship series. I just was so grateful for that opportunity because to contribute to that team's whole season and then to be able to finish it with them was just so special to me.
Guys, I've got Marianna Salas, and she is taking us through her Vanderbilt journey. I want to pivot from that point. You graduate from Vanderbilt, you end up going to Tulane Law School. And at the time you're in law school, you're still affiliated with yet another football program.
Yes.
So, what did you do for Tulane's football program while you're supposed to be studying for the law that you're there for?
Yeah. This is a recurring theme. So I by the time I graduated Vanderbilt, I had it in my head that I wanted to work in sports. I had spent pretty much every summer either at Vanderbilt or, like I said, at an agency or doing some sort of internship to bolster my resume, working towards sports. After I told my parents, I was like fully 10 toes in, like full steam ahead towards finding a career in sports. What I didn't know though was what that was going to look like. I had many options in front of me, and I had many various kind of seemingly scattered opportunities that I had had already on my resume that didn't really lead in a specific direction. And that was partly by design because the single most influential piece of advice that I got when I was in college was from our director of football operations at the time, Jason Grooms, who then went on to University of Texas and now works for a private company that is in the sports space. But he told me, I asked him because I thought maybe I'd want to be a DFO. I said, like, what should I do to get like you? I just have so much respect for the job that he did for our program. And he just always did it in such an immensely selfless way. And he said, the thing that you really need to do is one, be a servant leader. Everything that you do goes into those around you, everything you do. And number two is you need to understand the experiences of the people around you so that when you're in a position to lead and to help them, that you understand the struggles they go through and how best to help them. So, from his position as a DFO, he's coordinating all these different departments. And so he said, invest your time in learning all the different departments, learn everything you can about everyone and everything so you have a well rounded approach to whatever comes up. And so that's kind of why I did all these different things, whether it was work for him in operations, athletic training, communications, whatever, or agency. I was exploring all these things. So I go to Tulane Law School specifically to study sports law. One, because my family is at generations over Tulane Law legacy.
Mhm.
So my father went there. Many of my family members have gone to Tulane Law, but it just so happens that Tulane Law has a sports law program. And so it seemed like the very natural next step in what I was going to do. So I went to law school not really with the intent to become a lawyer, but with the intent to, one, learn the legal landscape of the sports industry, not just as it related to football, but as it relates to everything, whether it's how the MLB came into existence or the merger that became the NFL, or even more recent things like why does NIL even exist? How did we get here? What is amateurism? What are the labor laws that are involved in player contracts? All of those things were of interest to me, but also more importantly, just the frame of mind that a lawyer approaches any problem with, which I know for all the lawyers that are listening you can relate to that. It's a different frame of mind. It's a more analytical approach to problem solving. And I thought that that was something that would be able to set me apart. So, of course, with Tulane having a football team, I thought, well, I'll work for the team too and go double whammy. So I didn't have to make a PowerPoint for this one, but I did have to convince my father yet again, hey, I want to work for the team. And he's like, no, but it's law school. Like, it's a lot harder than college. I was like, I'll be fine. So I again sent some emails. I sent some emails with, an updated resume to the Tulane football program and got brought on as a personnel assistant.
Who's the
Um,
head coach at this point at Tulane?
oh, Willie Fritz.
Mhm.
So I worked for Willie Fritz for my entire time at Tulane. He
Okay.
actually left, gosh, was it this last December? Yeah, this last December, he left for the University of Houston,
Mhm.
but that was about 6 months after I left.
Mhm.
So I was a Willie Fritz staffer the entire time I was there. But I get to law school and I started my job with the team a few weeks prior.
What was your job title or responsibilities?
Oh, I didn't actually have a job title for a bit.
Mhm.
My job title ended up evolving into player personnel assistant and then also defensive assistant.
Well, let me pause you right there because that's where I want to. I'm thinking if my timeline is right, at this point, did you know who Jen Welter was? Did you know that name or know
So
who she
I
was?
I knew of her. I definitely knew of her.
Mhm.
I again at this point in my career or life in general, I didn't know what I was going to do in sports. Had
Mhm.
just no idea. At this point, though, I was thinking, I
But
actually
you,
emailed our director of football operations at Tulane, thinking that I might want to get into more operations, like I was starting to think at Vanderbilt. But he said, I don't really have any openings in my department, but personnel does. So I kind of just got punted over to personnel, which was
right?
great because learning about the
That's
legal landscape of sports, I was learning a lot about contracts. And I thought very quickly, okay, this could be an avenue into a front office where you're working with the salary cap, player contracts, roster management, stuff like that. And so really that was kind of the game plan from 2020 when I started there, really until about a year and a half ago. I was like, I'm gonna work for a team and salary cap and scouting and something like that. So
Mhm.
I knew who Jen Welter was though at the time,
Yep. Tell
really
folks.
just from social media though, and I did not think that I would one day be following in her footsteps at all at the time.
For those who don't know, 2015, I think it was, she became the first on-field coach in the NFL who was a woman and really just broke a bunch of barriers. And we're going to get into that part in a few minutes. I'm not trying to rush ahead because, again, football and just who you're exposed to and what they do within the Tulane program has now opened more doors for you of other
Absolutely.
avenues of potential professions that you may or may not have even known were possible or were even there.
Definitely. I was so lucky to again come into another program where it was smaller program.
Mhm.
They didn't have a whole lot of just interns around
Mhm.
like you might see it in Alabama or Georgia where kids have grown up their entire lives wanting to work for these football teams and they have just
That's
tons
the
of
big that's the
space.
big state school versus the small private schools that you've been with.
Exactly. And I live about 8 minutes away from Tulane's campus if I catch a couple red lights. So it's a stone's throw away from home. And they have always been, a smaller program. But I thought, well, what better way to continue the momentum of what I've built through all these different diverse experiences I had at Vanderbilt and continue investing in that while I'm learning about sports through my law school setting. So I, again, was just glad to be in the building and take advantage of whatever opportunity came. And so that came in the form of personnel, which was my first real experience in that space. So I had a lot of learning to do. I hadn't ever worked for any other team besides Vanderbilt either. So there was some newness there, and it took me a while to feel comfortable fully on that staff too. But again, was very lucky to be around great people who invested in me and wanted to help me grow. And we got very, very close. I still talk to everybody I worked with at Tulane on a very regular basis. Some of them are my very close friends. And together we again worked for a team that for a really long time just wasn't very good, and the struggle of that really brings people together, but it also makes you really, really hungry to be even better, and so you kind of become sort of just geared to help in however you possibly can, no matter if it is your
Well,
job
sure.
title or not.
Sure.
So carrying that same mindset that everyone had at Vanderbilt of just the more you can do into Tulane, I was doing more and more in personnel and I was helping with our recruiting a ton. The logistics of a recruiting department being run by three people is kind of insane when you're competing against schools like SMU or Houston or UCF. It just, we were trying to make we were trying to make a mountain out of like a handful of pebbles, and we were able to do it just because we figured out ways to do things creatively. And that was really another reason why I just started helping out with our defensive staff, was just because I was there and I was reliable and trustworthy enough to have somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, Mariana, will you help us? We need
But
somebody to
it's
help us."
but it's one thing to be in law school. It's one thing to help on a staff of a small private Division I school, but that doesn't mean you're automatically going to jump to the league. But you did.
Um,
How do we end up in New York?
Well, so this was a really, really awesome way that Tulane helped me. Was there's a there's a very strong Tulane sports law to New York Jets pipeline, of which I was, I believe, the fourth generation, and now there have been two after me. So there are six generations of Law students, Tulane sports law students, who have gone
Mhm.
on to work for the Jets and then hired another one behind them, starting with Mike Tannenbaum, who was the general manager of the Jets a long time ago. And he hired a guy named Ari Nissim, who was a Tulane student, and he started working at the Jets as an intern too. Got brought on full time, ended up being assistant GM. He and I are close. I buy Girl Scout cookies from his daughter every year now. But we met at a sports law conference in Atlanta one year when I was still a student, and that relationship has stayed very, very solid since then because we have that Tulane connection, and it's such a small program at a really small school in a rather small city that it's a really unique experience, similar to that of working for Vanderbilt Athletics. It's something that really ties you together no matter where you are at in your life or where you came from. But so Mike Tannenbaum hired Ari Nissim, who hired Nick Sabella, who is now, I think, their director of football administration. So he manages like all of their contracts. He's their lead contract negotiator, and he is brilliant in every way. And my sports law professor, Gabe Feldman, connected me to Nick once he learned that I was really serious about getting into contract negotiations and front office work once I graduated. So he connected me to Nick, and Nick said, "Hey, like I'll talk to you on the phone, give you some advice or whatever." And so I listened to everything he had to say, and he was so informative. He gave me such great advice, and oddly enough, he called me a few weeks after that and said, "Hey, would you be interested in applying for a position for us this summer?" And he was like, "I don't know if it's paid. I don't know what we can really offer you, but we'd like to interview you." I said, "Absolutely. Sure. Great.
Did
I'll
you know
figure it
what
out."
did you know what position or what responsibility?
So yeah, I knew that it would be in their personnel department. So some combination of salary cap and scouting.
Let me ask you this. At that point, did you know about the updated Rooney Rule that had gone into effect? Were you familiar with that at that point?
Was I? I think I knew
Because
loosely about it.
it came into effect in 2022. I'm just not sure when it became applicable.
I knew when it was passed that it was
Mhm.
passed. I just didn't really think that it applied to me at the time, or really didn't even have that on my radar as something that would potentially like help me in any way, because I think at the time it was more for like executive level positions and
Mhm.
not like the positions that I was going for, which were like intern positions.
Mhm.
So I knew when that was passed because we discussed it in class, because that was like a major focus of a segment of one of our classes. But when he approached me about interviewing for this job, I was just like, "Sure, I'll interview. Great. Awesome. Like, I don't care if you pay me or not. I'll figure it out." So then I went through a very extensive interview process, had to watch players film, write reports on them, present it to their whole scouting staff. That was scary. Oh my gosh, it was scary. But yeah, I
Were
actually
you
ended up,
creating
I gave,
PowerPoints at the
well, no, so I had to fill out their scouting form, which each team does it differently, but they have a
Mhm.
grading scale, and you write your evaluations on specific aspects of the player. And I ended up giving the equivalent of like a B plus to the linebacker that had the highest amount of tackles from that previous season. So when I I tried to not do any like research about them because I didn't want that to skew my opinion of them and their tape, which I thought was a good thing to do, except I probably should have at least just hit Google to find out that I gave a B plus to, I guess on paper, the best tackler in the league. So I found that out after I finished presenting, and I was like, well, I certainly didn't get this job. But fortunately, they overlooked that mistake. And
Or that might have been the thing that they were convinced
it
by.
could have, you know what? I gotta ask them. I should
Hmm.
ask them. I still talk to them very regularly.
Hmm.
Again, had a wonderful experience with them. They taught me so much, and they invested so much time in not just me, but the entire intern group they had that year. I learned more than I ever imagined. I honestly just expected to go and do intern work, but no, it was honestly more of a structured educational experience than your typical internship would
So
ever be.
you finished that time with them, which was when? Spring of 23?
So that was just for the summer of 22. Yeah.
Okay.
I was there from June to the beginning of September of 2022. And then came right back to New Orleans and played our first
And
game against UMass Amherst like 2 days later. That was wild.
now let's come forward. We've got a few more minutes, and I appreciate you sharing your
Oh,
story.
of
It's
course.
fascinating to me.
Sorry, I'm not very short-winded.
How do you make the jump then, Jets back to law school, and now with your present employer, the Baltimore Ravens?
It's kind of a funny story. Um, I did not really go looking for this job. In fact, I really just got an email asking me to interview for this job. But the backstory behind that is after working for the Jets and working for Tulane football and basically just building up connections through all the teams and all the people that I've met through those teams.
And a resume at this point.
Definitely, yeah. I was very fortunate to by this time have more experience than the vast majority of people in my sort of age group cohort, but also definitely more experience than the average person who is still in school.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a program that the NFL runs called the NFL Women's Forum, which is such a great program that works to identify. It's led by a woman named Sam Rappaport, who is the NFL's senior director of diversity and inclusion. And this is like her brainchild for the last really about 10 years. I
Since
think
2017, I think it's been going on.
yeah, she's been working on this since years before then, but I was fortunate to be selected for the spring 2023 edition of the NFL Women's Forum, which is essentially 40 or so, I think it's about 40
Mhm.
of identified female football staffers of all sorts, whether it's in the coaching space or personnel space or player engagement, really anything, even video equipment, anything that touches football. They do their best to bring in a wide array of promising young women in the typically college football space. Some of them come from like the international program background, but they bring them in for a couple days during the combine and have everything from large panels, getting to hear from NFL head coaches, GMs, really high level people in the league. And then they break off into roundtable sessions, and you get to have conversations with people and hear their stories, their advice, and all the things that have made them successful. But what happens as a matter of that event is your resumes are distributed throughout the league as sort of, hey, these are the 40 that the league has selected as really promising. So if you, as a NFL team that's hiring for your summer internships or maybe even your full-time positions, you have these women to pick from that we've already kind of vetted in a way.
Let me pause you. Did you grasp what this really was before you went to it? Did you
Um,
realize when you were on the cusp of entering to? Did it hit you then or before you went?
well, I remember very vividly knowing about this event for probably 2 or 3 years prior, and I thought, wow, this would be really cool, but you can't apply for it. There's like you can't really apply for it. You kind
You
of just
got the Willy Wonka golden ticket.
That's exactly it. I just got an email. Other people that I knew in the business already had told me, hey, you really need to get in touch with Sam Rappaport. Like, you need to really get in touch with Sam. She can be a really advantageous person to know. Um, Now I never really did, except for the email I received from her saying that I had been selected to participate in the forum. And I
And
was
you
like,
didn't think
wow,
it
okay,
was
this is really
spam
cool.
or you didn't think it was spam or a joke by a
No,
friend.
thank God it didn't go to my junk mail. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't see it. But so I get this email and I knew about it and I was like, wow, this is cool. Like this is something that I thought I would want to do and now it's happening. But the event has grown significantly since its inception. And the the year that I took part in this was by far its biggest year. And I really did not fully grasp how momentous this occasion was, not only for me specifically, but for the league's progress in equality and inclusion as a whole. I had no idea until I walked into this ballroom in the JW Marriott in Indianapolis, and there are news cameras everywhere. There are hundreds of people in this room. There are spotlights, there's a stage. This whole thing is like very intense. I didn't think it was going to be like this. So, anyway, I go on throughout the day. It is an amazing, amazing day. I learned so much. I got to meet so many people and just had no expectations going in and left that day feeling like, wow, I could seriously pick whatever I wanted to do. And the league is not only going to have a spot for me if I'm willing to go and get it, but I will be able to have a spot in this league and in this space for as long as I choose to, because now the doors are wide open. So, as you said earlier, right place, right time. Hell
Yeah.
yeah. Because I never, ever, ever thought that I could be a GM or a head coach or even a scout or a coach of any kind until probably in the last, I don't know, 3-ish years,
Mhm.
because I simply never saw it, except I had little tiny bits of information in the back of my mind from seeing things on social media like Jen Welter or Lori Locust or Callie Brownson, who are just like giants to me because they were some of the first female coaches, or Catherine Raish, who's the assistant GM of the Browns. I hadn't seen that many women doing these jobs. And the women's forum really solidified to me that they might be the few, but they are the mighty. And there's going to be more like them. And so that to me really was confirmation that everything I'd been doing leading up to now was not just like fun and games, not just an entertaining part of my life that was kind of a side hustle or like just
It
not
was
like a hobby like it might have started out as, but it was something that was real and very much so a part of my long-term future.
it was your building blocks all those years. Newman,
Everything.
Vanderbilt, Tulane, every bit of that. And I want to be careful the way I ask this question because I by no means want to insult you.
No, of course.
You're at the combine in Indianapolis. You're in the grounds. I don't know if you're in the stadium at all, but you're at the JW and you go to this forum. Did it ever, and here's my question, did it ever, I guess, come to your mind that this was your combine, kind of what the men are going through on the field at the same time? And I don't know if that's a good parallel, and I don't mean to be insulting at all, but this is a tryout essentially because you're interviewing with all the right people. You're being exposed to all the people who hire people that, for these jobs.
Absolutely. So I realized probably the week before that this was going to be sort of like my combine, as you said, because what happens leading up to the women's forum is your portfolios are distributed throughout the league via email. And from there, teams can reach out to you. So I received um, a couple emails from several of the teams, and I had been kind of receiving a little bit of traction even prior to the women's forum. But again, like I was still in law school, so I wasn't really able to fully be like, hey, I'm looking for a job right this minute. But leading up to the forum in the days prior, I had received a couple requests to have some interview meetings. And so not only was I preparing for the women's forum, but I was also preparing for these interviews. And that was really nerve wracking because I honestly had never really officially interviewed for a job that like I was interviewing against someone else for.
Mhm.
Sounds like a really privileged position, but I just was a student and I was free labor at the time. So I was interviewing for like my first actual real jobs.
You're about to start adulting.
For sure. Oh my gosh, yeah. So I go to Baltimore, I mean sorry, no, Indianapolis with my suitcase, which is half full of portfolios that I'd made thanks to all the resources I had at Tulane from making countless recruiting binders and things like that. Like I came prepared, but I show up there not only for the forum, but also for these interviews. And like I said, I didn't really know that the forum was going to be like as intense as it was. I knew it was a really big deal and I was really excited for it. But when the stage lights flicked on, I was like, okay, we're in it. Like I'm gonna be here for like 3 or 4 days, and I'm here to absolutely just like hit every hole in one I can. So it was really intense. It was really, really fun. Fortunately, I got to see a lot of people that I already knew. So that made it a lot more comfortable than it might have been for some other people who may not have had friends in the business there at the time. But it was a really amazing experience. And then, actually, to make this a super full circle moment, I was invited this past year to speak on a panel of the 12 female coaches in the league. There are seven, there are seven football coaches, and there are five either strength and performance coaches, or sorry, strength conditioning or sports performance coaches. So in all, that makes 12 female coaches in the league, which I think is the highest number ever. And I was fortunate to be in that group, and we all actually spoke on a panel at this year's Women's Forum, which was the craziest experience ever because really just 12 months prior, I was sitting on the other side
Wow.
of that stage in the crowd. And I don't think any of there was actually one girl who works for the Indianapolis Colts named Izzy Diaz, who's a great friend of mine now, was in the forum with me when we were participants, and then we shared the stage for that panel. So it was a great full circle moment to have come so quickly after I was just trying to get my foot in the door, and then here I am speaking to them. It was a great thing.
Let me kind of put this into perspective and tell me if my numbers are wrong. There's been over 100 years of professional football. The first on-field coach was a woman, Jen Welter, was not until 2015. So in less than 10 years, there's now, as you said, a dozen. I don't know what this season looks like, but I guess you're referring to this past season. But there are about 800 coaches who are titled coach at any given time in the NFL across all the franchises. So if there's only about a dozen there, and of course every franchise has support personnel, but they're not of the title of coach. So, and I don't mean to be skipping around on you, but when you interviewed and finally got the position with the Ravens, how did one, how did they come to you or you go to them? How did y'all pair up that ultimately that you interviewed with them and were offered a position?
Well, the Ravens were the only coaching position I actually interviewed for. Every other job that I had on the table during the months leading up to my graduation from law school were all scouting or salary cap related.
Mhm.
And like I said earlier, throughout law school, I thought I was kind of trending more towards um, the front office side of football, and I really, again, didn't have coaching on my radar as a menu of a possible option. Now, I always knew that I thought it was awesome how intricate and complicated and grueling and rewarding coaching can be, just as a matter of having gotten really close with lots and lots of coaches that I've worked with previously. And I have such a huge amount of respect for every single one that I've ever worked with and everything they've taught me about what they do. So I was really fortunate to have a almost insider look into what that might look like and to have that little tiny bug in the back of my head of maybe you might be interested in this. But like I said before, I just hadn't really seen a whole lot of women doing what I do now. And
And what tell us what is that? What are your job titles and
well,
responsibilities?
now I am a coaching fellow for the Baltimore Ravens. I work for the defensive backs and more largely the defense in general. I work with the corners and safeties, and I assist our defensive coordinator, Zach Orr, with pretty much everything he needs on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, that goes into our weekly opponent advance. So how we study our upcoming opponents is a very detailed process that starts weeks in advance of when we actually play the game and involves a lot of people, a lot of data, and a lot of time and energy so that we can be as well prepared as we can as coaches, but then also prepare our players as well as possible so that nothing comes up that we're not ready for. And then that also translates into how we are actually preparing the players. So a large function of my job is to work to develop protocols and programs to better assist our players in the learning of the material they have to absorb and retain and recall in game every single week, whether it's related to our plays or our opponent's tendencies. So it's a really huge privilege to have the job I have now and to have the opportunity to invest in all these different things that I think are so immensely just exhilarating, honestly. Like you just don't really realize. I certainly didn't realize when I started how incredibly fulfilling the title of coach can be. I never, partly because I just wasn't really exposed to it, and a lot of people grow up in coaching families. Like they're like our inside linebackers coach, for instance, his father is a really well respected coach for many, many years, and that's kind of all he grew up knowing. But me, I never knew that. So for me to have this experience now as our assistant defensive backs coach really is the the craziest, most fulfilling experience ever, just because I get to work with such great players and such great people on a day-to-day basis, and we all get to contribute to something that's so much bigger than any one of us could ever do on our own. So
Have you gotten used to being called coach? Yeah.
no, absolutely not. That's no. I'll never forget the first time.
Mhm.
Well, actually, there were two times. One was when our head coach John Harbaugh, who is an amazing, amazing person, amazing leader, but also just a great person to be around on a day-to-day basis. He's just a great person to know as not just as your boss, but I mean, he's got such great stories and such a great perspective on life. But he called me coach for the first time, and I was like, wait a minute, what?
It didn't register with you,
Well,
probably.
yeah, I it didn't feel supernatural. So I was like, okay, that's, like that's cool. But then the thing that really almost, I mean, it was almost a moment that was like too big for what I was ready for at the time. But one of my players
Mhm.
was introducing me to his children,
Mhm.
who are very small. They can't have been older than 4, but his son and his daughter were at the facility, and he said to his children, he was like, "That's our coach. That's Coach Marianna." And I was like, "Oh my God, what?" And I'm thinking this whole time, if I was like 4 years old and I was specifically like this player's daughter, and I saw somebody that was, a woman, 26 years old, and was coaching in the NFL, like my life might have gone a completely different direction, and I might have kind
Well,
of gotten here in a little bit more of a direct way. Now, I'm not saying that I would want that to happen, because it is absolutely certain to me that without every single step along my journey, every single different experience at Vanderbilt, every experience at Tulane, every experience in every summer has perfectly led me to where I am now. So I would not change or exchange or delete a single one of those. But then to have all of those things that seem so unrelated and scattered lead me to one of my players like introducing me as his coach to his daughter and son was just, that was a really cool full circle moment for me.
and you better get used to it.
Yeah, I
Now,
know. I'm a little bit more used to it now, but
and
that was
now
crazy.
in the film room, in the DB's film room, you're now going to have players younger than you in that room.
Oh yeah, a lot of them are younger than me. I mean,
Mhm.
we have a handful of rookies right now, and they were born, I think, in
Mhm.
like 2002 or 3.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
actually, like I think one of them might have been born in 2004 or 5.
yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. We have a really good range of ages in our DB's room, actually. Some of them are close to
Well,
30.
I was going to say Humphrey's got to be 30 or so, isn't he?
I think he is 30
Mhm.
or is turning 30. We have Marcus Williams, who I want to say is close to 30, or maybe
Mhm.
is 30. I should know this. Dang. But
Well,
but we have,
one
like, some of them have kids and some of them are basically still kids themselves. But it's a great room, and there's a lot of really really great personalities, and as our defense as a whole has a lot of really exceptional people, exceptional leaders, and a huge amount of talent. So I'm very, very happy to be in the room I'm in now.
I know you're very happy with where you are now, but do you have aspirations to be in other positions along the way, even all the way up to head coach? Do you have those aspirations?
This is a funny question, because actually I get this question a lot, and until very recently I didn't have a super clear answer, and that
Mhm.
kind of rubs some people the wrong way, and some people are perfectly agreeable to this. But for the longest time I said, I don't really have a solid single track mind of what the end goal might look like. It could be GM, it could be, any number of these things. But now, after the past year of going through my first season in the NFL as a full-time coach, and really my first season anywhere as a full-time coach, I can now say that I would like to remain a coach for as long as I possibly can, because I think it's really always kind of been there. I just didn't know that it was there. I didn't have the time and the place, like, wasn't right to bring it out of me until it was brought out of me. Thankfully, the Ravens thought it might be good to interview me, and now I'm able to say that I really immensely enjoy what I do now and want to continue doing that. And I also am very cognizant of the fact that it really doesn't matter whether you're a guy or a girl or where you come from or anything, because if you're in the right place and you're at the right time, like I am fortunate to have been, if you can help the team win, nobody really cares what you look like or really anything else, because we're all there to just win. everything is really about just how can we be better as a group. It doesn't matter that I'm 26 and younger than some of the players, or 26 and a girl that's, a lot younger than the rest of our coaching staff. Everyone has a place there because they were chosen because of the quality of their ideas and their creativity and their work ethic and things like that. So I think it's just important now for me to sort of come to terms with the fact that I actually really, really like this. And I, for a long time, wasn't really certain what I wanted to do. But
Mhm.
now I have a lot more clarity of that because I found the right thing at the right time.
Have you found your footing to be able to talk like a seasoned coach with some of these older players who may or may not have certain personality types? Are you able to get a point across what you're teaching and putting away or putting aside the fact that they are who they are and they make all this money, they're all pro, whatever, you're still their coach. They still have to follow your teachings. Have you gotten to that point where you've got a firm footing to be able to do that?
I think it's so much about trust, right? It's
Mhm.
everyone's career is on the line, but especially theirs, especially when they're on the field in a game and they are putting their trust in you
Mhm.
to help them be the best they can be. But that goes both ways. So I have to do my part in building a relationship with them
Mhm.
such that they know me as a person and they can trust me as a person because there's so much, like you said, like there's so much stress, there's so much pressure, but really all anybody wants is to just be respected as a person. And if I respect them as people and I get to know them as people, and if you're just a good person and they know you that you work hard and that you're intelligent and that you are going to do right by them by doing your very best so that they have all the tools that they can possibly have to be their best, then it's really, really easy. It doesn't really feel like anything more than just working together more than anything else. I think sometimes in football it can seem like, the coaches are there to tell the players everything to do and like they just have to do it. That's not at all how we run things at the Ravens, at least, because our players are really valuable sources of information. And so a lot of times we will leave things up to them and we will ask them for their input and say, like, how would you like to do this? Or how do you see this? What is the best way for you to be able to do this? Because they all have immense amounts of experience and they're the ones that have to work together on the field. And we don't want to put them in positions that put them at risk to not succeed at the level that they expect to or that we expect to. So for us and me specifically, it really starts from just building relationships and being a generally good person and letting them get to know you
Mhm.
because I just don't see another way for a player to really gain respect for a coach or really for a coach to gain respect for a player other than just getting to know one another and being honest and being yourself every day and working towards that common goal. But I will say, like, I have been so, so, so fortunate to step into a position group and also a defensive unit that is filled with incredible people from the coaches through every single player. They are just consummate professionals. I have never, ever, ever had anything but positive experiences with our players, and that really speaks volumes on the job that our general manager Eric DaCosta does, and John Harbaugh as well. Like selecting players that are not just talented on the field, but are very, very good, kind-hearted people. So I really wish that I knew earlier how the dynamics of working with players would be like because it's not that complicated. It's just about being a good person and working together with people.
I've kept you too long.
No,
You're
no, 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 please.
You're telling a fascinating story, and I'm so glad you've had some time. I do have two last questions.
Of course.
On Sundays, where are you during the game?
On Sundays, now this
Mhm.
is still to be finalized for this season. We haven't fully ironed out all the details, but I have every reason to believe I will be where I was last season, which is in the coach's box. So wherever we're at in whatever stadium, whether it's home or away, I am in the coach's box with a headset on and about 25 pens right next to me and different highlighters, charting our plays so that we can have all the information as we analyze every drive as it happens, as we get off the field, and then at halftime when we look for any adjustments we might want to make, and then yeah, picking up on any sort of tendencies that might come up. But that's my responsibility. So if you ever see somebody in the coach's box, that's me.
Do you have game day superstitions?
Ooh. Um,
You can call them rituals, you can call them traditions, whatever you call them. Is there one thing that has to happen? A certain food, a certain, I don't know, you tell us.
a certain thing that has to happen is, well, so I bring extras of everything that I'll need,
Mhm.
and that comes from my father. I was never an extras person until like going to horse shows. He would always bring extra pairs of riding pants in case it rained or I spilled nachos on myself. Like I was never an extras person until one time I really needed an extra, and I was so glad my dad had an extra, and I was like, wow, okay, I'm an extras person now.
Mhm.
So I bring, I mean, actually like 30 writing utensils. It's like a fistful. Different color pens, different color highlighters, everything I could possibly need, but like two of everything. And then two, sometimes three of the big charts that I use. And I I will never ever be caught without a spare of those things. And the other thing that I do is I always am constantly drinking water because I drink a lot of water to begin with, but I'm constantly drinking water. And if I don't have waters next to me, it can't be like soda or anything like that. It has to be water, and it has to be like room temperature. It can't be too cold. Yeah.
Look,
So those are my things. Other than
the-
that, though, I don't have any like super weird things. I wear the same thing for every game, pretty much.
everybody, and if you're an athlete or if you're part of athletics, everyone has something along those lines. I
Yeah.
could keep you here another hour and 45 minutes, but I'm not going to tonight. I want to be respectful and bring this to sadly for me to a close. And Marianna, I can't thank you enough for how proud you make the black and gold, for
No.
everything that you do. I know that on some level you appreciate and realize that you're on that first or second generation of building blocks for women in the NFL. And at some point into the future, you'll figure that part out. But whatever you've done up to this point, just keep doing what you're doing. I have
Thank
no
you
doubt of
so
it.
much. I am so happy to have spent this time with you and to talk everything about Vanderbilt. It's such a special place to me, and I absolutely would not be where I am today without every minute I spent in McGugin and on that practice field, because that really shaped me into the person I am today for sure, but also launched my career in many more ways than one. And if you ever see me with my handy water bottle in the
There we
box,
go.
there's this sticker right here.
There
So
we go.
I this will be on TV at some point this year, but
Well, guys,
proudly so.
this is exactly why I do this show every week. We're telling the oral history of the Vanderbilt program and the people who impacted it, whether it was on the field or off the field, whether they're memorable to themselves or their family or to others. It doesn't matter. They're part of our program. So, Marianna, thank you again. Hang on here while I sign off. I want to share one more thing with you offline. Guys, keep coming back. We've only got a couple more weeks till first kickoff. I hope you've got your tickets, made your plans. There's all kind of tailgating. Keep coming back into the Facebook group every day. You know, guys, we keep putting stuff in there. Anchor down.
Thanks, guys.